Welcome, welcome. We will get started in just a moment. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the Gray Decision Intelligence Demand Trend webinar designed specifically for community college professionals. This is not your average webinar. It's an opportunity to gain insights into labor market data for program evaluation and to use data to debunk common myths about community college programs. I want to thank you again for attending. You will receive a link to the webinar recording and the presentation slides in the next few days, so please look for this link in your email from Gray. We have with us Bob Atkins, who's not only Gray's CEO and founder, but also a program evaluation expert and a best-selling author among higher ed publications. There are a few housekeeping items to get started with. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a place labeled Q&A. Please feel free to add your questions there. We'll get to as many as we can during the session, and we'll follow up later with you if we run out of time. Also, have you been wondering about launching a particular new program or what the potential job market looks like for your students? At the end of the presentation, we will give you the opportunity to review programs in real time with PES and Gray's Director of Customer Success. You can pop your program requests into the Q&A or the chat at any time during the presentation. And now, without further ado, I will turn things over to our founder, Bob Atkins.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Much appreciated. And thanks to all of you for joining us this afternoon. Know you've got very busy schedules, and we'll make this as valuable for you as possible. So today we're going to talk about the demand for higher education programs, and specifically demand for community college level programs, two-year programs, both workforce as well as transfer programs. So we'll start off by talking a little bit about what a program evaluation system actually is. Then we'll flow into student demand, employer demand, and finally a deep dive in one program that we can share with you, and you can see how that particular program's doing across all of our indicators, and obviously we'll summarize. So what a devil is a program evaluation system? Well, first of all, it's got a lot of data, and we'll walk through what each of those data elements is. But importantly, a good program evaluation system includes the people in a well-managed process to make good decisions using the information. So sadly, I don't have an algorithm that can tell you what programs to offer. And even if I did, I probably wouldn't share it in the sense that I found that kind of outside-in or top-down recommendation in higher ed doesn't work. So it's much better and more effective to actually get the right folks involved in making these decisions, but using the right information to inform their decisions. So what information do you need? We need information on markets, student demand, employment, competition, what's the appropriate degree level, what's the cost of that program typically. All that information is important in order to determine whether there's likely to be demand for the program by students and jobs for your graduates. And always remember, just because they're jobs doesn't mean they're students that want to take those programs. And just because they're students doesn't mean they're jobs for them on the other end. So you really need to look at both of those factors. And it's a very significant error to overemphasize labor markets in this process. I was just on the phone with the provost who was saying that they've had demand for people that wanted to do anything with the word electric in it, from electrician to electrical engineer. And they know that employers want those people, but they can't get students to sign up for those courses and programs. So just keep that in mind. You need to look at both ends in order to make sure there's a good balance, not just employers or just student interest. Margins. This is direct instructional revenue cost, and when you subtract those two, you get margin. Why do we care about this, and why do you need to care about it? Well, first of all, we need to make sure that programs that are small, but maybe not able to stand on their own 2 feet financially, are aligned with your mission, that they have enough money coming from other programs to support them. So fundamentally, what we're doing here by understanding margin is looking at the web of cross-subsidies that exist in an institution and making sure that we're moving money appropriately from programs that have high margins to programs that don't, but are critical to the success of the institution, to the mission of the institution. Then, of course, you got to make sure that they're delivering against your academic standards, whether that's student graduation rates, retention rates, performance on external tests and certifications. But you don't want to be offering programs that are either way over the head of your institution or inappropriately, um, too low level or in otherwise inappropriate academically. And finally, mission, that we're talking about here about the institutional purpose or focus. This is why higher education institutions exist. We're not here to make money. We're here to fulfill a particular mission. And all these things need to be taken into account when we're making a program decision. And as I mentioned at the outset, the best way to do that is take the data and bring together the right people in a good, efficient process for deciding what programs to start, stop, or grow. Now, I also should put my plug in for my book called Start, Stop, or Grow, a data-informed approach to program evaluation and management. It's been out there for about a year now. We have well over 1,000 copies sold. And the reason it's been selling is because it's one of the first books since Dickinson to really articulate how to do program evaluation in a modern context and how to use all this information to do that effectively. So if you're thinking about program evaluation, obviously I'm biased, but I would suggest well worth a read. It's not too long. You may have to wake yourself up a couple times during your reading process, but if nothing else, you can put it by your bedside and you will sleep better for it. Student demand. There are a number of indicators of student demand. We start with iPads. We're all familiar with it. Very large database. That's the Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System. Everybody has to report their completions into that database. And often that completion data, since it's by program, is used as a proxy for program size and student interest, which is fine overall, and it's a good indicator of overall program size. Unfortunately, when it comes to trend information, it's not a lot of help. Why? Well, the data stops in 2022. That's the most current iteration. So it's already pushing 2 years out of date. And then you have to pause and say, well, wait a second, my students chose their major 2 to 4 years before they graduated. So really the data in iPads is telling you what students wanted in 2020 and before. And that's starting to look a little long in the tooth at this point. So we went looking for better data, more current data. And the next best source, actually it's a better source in many ways, is enrollment data. We get this from the National Student Clearinghouse, also authoritative. All Title IV institutions are in here, and it's divided down by program. But the difference between that and iPads is enrollment data updates 3 times a year. So we're very, very current on this, and it tells you what people want now. The next step, of course, is to try and understand what people might want in the future. And for that, we look to Google, which I think gives us insight on what people are going to want 6 to 18 months in the future, depending on the degree level. The higher the degree level, the longer that search process tends to be. So your PhDs might be out at 18 months. I think most of your folks are thinking about a 2-year program or probably 3 to 6 months from their start date. But that might be a little bit of an underestimate. So keep in mind, Google's forward-looking enrollment's very good current. iPads is really a backwards-looking statistic. And today we'll focus in on Google and enrollment data. So what's going on out there? Well, first, let me explain how to read this chart. So this is US Google search volume. It covers 900 programs. That's about 90% of all completions in the United States. The dark blue bar is 2021 data. The light blue bar is 2022. And the medium blue is 2022. And the light blue bar is 2023. And what we're hoping for in this case is actually pretty much what we're seeing for the last 4 months, that in each case, 2021 was lower than 2022, which is lower than 2023, i.e. it's been growing. So let's hope that that's the case. And in fact, we see in 2023 that we've got strong upward trend. The data is up 12%. So this makes us pretty optimistic about the demand for workforce programs increasing as we move forward. And certainly would be a welcome break for all community colleges. You all have been going through a very rough time recently with enrollment declines that have stretched back now 3, 4, 5 years. So it's nice to see some indicators that suggest that that long drought might be over. And you can see even as recently as 6 months ago, we were still down year over year. So it's nice to see that consistent upward trend here in the last 4 months. Google cost per click. This gives you an idea of how much it will cost you to actually go out and market to a student. And in December, that number rose to $11.07 per click. That's down from 2 years ago, but up from last year by about $1, a little bit less, 50 cents. So I'm not sure how that comes out to so about 4% increase year over year. And this gives you a sense of what's trending in terms of the cost for you if you want to go out and acquire students in the marketplace using search technology. So this is how a lot of people come looking for you. And in particular, if you want to market a specific program, you may want to play in this space to let students know that you offer it. Fastest growing programs, and now we're talking about uh, um, overall within the two-year sector. And what's interesting I find about this chart, this teal is healthcare. And if you look back over the last several years, you would find that healthcare consistently dominated this list of fastest growing programs. And this year, only in this month, only one healthcare related program is in the top 10. Having looked at this lots of times, I find that pretty startling. What did win? Career and technical education, auto mechanics, always been a great program. Down here at the bottom, you see diesel mechanics as well, growing over 16%. Nail specialist and manicurist, cosmetology, think of personal care in these two, both up close to 30%. HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, maintenance tech, up 26%. Then we get a couple of what I would just call general other programs, legal, tax prep, and business and operations support. And one more CTE program, industrial maintenance or mechanics and maintenance techs, up 18%. So very heavy showing by CTE programs, not much representation in healthcare. And tax prep always booms around this time of year, and every year we seem to need more of it. So we're starting into tax season. Not surprising to see more interest in this space as well. What is also interesting in this is that what is growing varies a lot year to year. So it's important for you all to have current information so you can anticipate what's likely to happen to you in terms of class sizes coming into the next semester or the next year. And if we look at this, we've got 5 where the fastest growers overlapped year over year. Last year, we had a lot more healthcare, magnetic resonance imaging, MRI, health information records tech, medical billing and coding, massage therapy, medical clinical assistant, all made the top 10. And you remember that only one of those made the top 10 this year. We did have a few that repeat, and we'll take those over here. Nail specialist, manicurist, cosmetology, those personal care ones. Tax prep was big last year, big again this year, or fast growing, I should say. Business and diesel grew in both years. So, and there's one here we didn't, no, that's right. I kept thinking auto tech was big last year, and it's not. So, the second fastest growing program this year didn't make the top 10 last year. Now, what's going on in enrollment? So we're shifting databases. Now we're looking at things that are quite current, not as forward-looking as Google, but very current. And we're finally seeing some good news at the certificate level after, if you went back earlier, many years of decline, very acute decline during COVID, -7%. We're seeing a nice bounce back, 3% up in 2021, up another 3 in 2022. And we made it scooched over zero and made a 1% increase in 2023. Total fall enrollment has finally turned around. It's up 0.02%. So, as I say, a very welcome shift for all of our clients in the community college space to finally see an increase in enrollment. And here in Massachusetts, I was talking with the community college president. They're actually seeing double-digit increases for the first time since 2020, I think, or excuse me, since 2000. I mean, it's really it's probably not fair. Since the recession would probably be right. They're up 2%. I'm sorry, up in the teens, and partly as a result of some very successful new programs they've launched, but also because of general demographic factors and some very healthy incentives that the state of Massachusetts has offered. Certificate, the 10 largest programs, these account for 32% of total enrollment. So it's an interesting thing to think about when you look at that long list of programs you offer, that a third of all the students are going to probably end up in the 10 to 15 largest programs. So these are the ones that are really essential to the success of a school. Liberal arts, licensed vocational nursing, and you can see we've got one other healthcare that made the list here, medical clinical assistant. Career and technical education has 5 entries here, welding tech, bookkeeping, auto mechanic tech, EMT paramedic, and electrician. And then finally, we have a couple of others, business management and general studies. So these are not surprising. If you think about career and technical education, and as well as your transfer programs, these are all known big programs. It always surprises me, though, the degree to which the number of students and graduates is concentrated in a handful of majors. These are really the core of a two-year college. What's growing in terms of enrollment? Cybersecurity has been on the top of this list for some time. It is now a big program. Isn't the top 10 yet, but it is a very big program, and it's up 18% year over year. So I would guess this will continue to grow. If all the annoying security procedures I have to go through to log into everything continue, we'll need people to manage this, and we will, I think, have hackers with us for the foreseeable future. So this is a big program, lots of employer demand, and a lot of student interest. Healthcare, not surprising to see it on this list. Nice to see it again, actually, because it did drop off for a little while. It takes 5 of the slots. Health services, nursing, patient care aid. Registered nursing is growing again. It shrank for a couple of years. And licensed practical vocational nurse up 4%, EMT up 4%. We're finally beginning to see the effects of COVID on interest in nursing erode. It had a big negative effect here, and for the first time in a long time, we saw declines here, and it's nice to see it coming back. And business administration management bringing up the rear here at 4% growth. Now let's shift and look at associates programs. Median total enrollment here, 262. These account for 60% of all enrollment in associate level programs. So always when you're looking at your catalog, remember that the 80-20 rule, not quite 80-20, applies here. And a handful of programs, again, really drive most of the enrollment. First and foremost, liberal arts. Second, general studies. These are all folks preparing to make a specialized decision later on at a 4-year college, typically. Business management, number 3. Registered nursing, one of the biggest programs in the United States. Here it is. 300,000 people enrolled across the U.S. in registered nursing programs. Computer science, psychology, biology, health and services, biological and physical sciences, and engineering. So we have 4 STEM programs in the top 10. We only have a handful of health-related, nursing, psychology, and health services general. And then we have the usual general studies and other, including business, in our top 10. Let's see why my machine is not moving, advancing pages. All right. So what's growing at the associate level? Cybersecurity, here again, up 18%. We've got a number of healthcare programs that are growing, 5 of them. Health services, allied health general, nursing assistant, patient care aid, registered nursing, licensed vocational nurse, and EMT paramedic. We have 3 CTE programs, electrician, welding tech, and auto mechanics, all up 7 to 10%. And we've got a handful of other, of course, number 1 are cybersecurity, and number 2, business administration and management, up 4%. Now, one of the things about this, we're reporting out national data. When we work with clients, we set up our systems so that they're customized for that individual client's market. That might be 20 miles around their campus. It depends on the individual school, and we look at their enrollment data and where students come from to figure out the core market that that school serves. We do that because demand for programs varies a lot by geography. So you can see if we look at the state of Arizona versus the state of New Jersey, the fastest growing programs are quite different. The only one that's common across both is cybersecurity, up 24% in Arizona. But even though it's on the list over here, it is double the growth rate, 53% in New Jersey. So it's growing much faster in New Jersey than it is in Arizona. Other than that, there's no overlap between the 2 lists. So the moral of the story here is our national data is helpful, but you really do need local data in order to make your decisions about what the most advantageous programs are to offer for your institution. The employment side of this, which we'll talk about more in a minute, but also varies widely, as you all know. The larger employers, the industries that are present in one market may be absent in another market. I think of New Jersey, very heavy healthcare presence. If we're looking at Arizona, health sciences presence, I should say. Arizona, less health sciences, a lot of hospitals. So very different employer markets as well as different in terms of student demand and enrollment. Now let's look at a little bit of what's going on in a non-degree market. Many of you play in this space in your adult and career education programs that you may run at night or may run online. And so what we do here is we look at a couple of the big players. Today we'll focus on Coursera that offer courses in a massive open online course environment, a MOOC as it's called. And in Coursera, a little bit of context. Udemy is actually the bigger player here. It's about 4 times the size of Coursera. Udemy is almost pure tech, so it's not quite as interesting to look at. We have that data if you're interested. Feel free to give us a call. We can look at what's hot in Udemy as well. Coursera offers more of a mix of programs, so I think it gives a little bit better sense of the general interests of students, not just the technical certificates they're interested in getting. And some of these things have been big for a while, but just the sheer scale of MOOCs is incredible. Coursera in 2023 alone had more than 18.5 million people sign up for a course. Now, that doesn't equate to an enrollment in a regular college. These are very inexpensive. Many of them are free. So you can come in, take one class and drop out, and you'd be in that 18.5 million learners. Guilty secret, I've actually done that. The course was terrific. I just didn't find time to continue. Data everywhere. The biggest course in Coursera. Almost 1 million people have taken that particular one last year. Science of Well-Being is number 2. And there's several other, what I would call personal improvement kinds of offers here. Learning how to learn, initiating a successful project. And I think there's a little bit of, thinking through my own psychology when I see a lot of people taking intro to psych and better understanding themselves as well as others and how that psychology works. We also have a lot of interest in user experience design or UX, tech support fundamentals, AI for everyone. I predict this is going to grow for the next several years as people try to come to grips with AI. And there are lots of related courses being taught on Coursera and Udemy now. For example, prompt engineering is another course that's offered on the platform. Then we have Crash Course on Python and Share Data through the Art of Visualization. So as you would expect in these platforms, there is a heavy emphasis on data and technology, but we have a healthy representation of other areas that still make the top 10 on Coursera. So let's take a little bit of a switch here. We're going from student demand now to employer demand. Now, I'm going to show you some data that's very different from what you're accustomed to looking at. Why is it different? Most labor market data is predicated on a false assumption that people go into the fields for which they're directly prepared. So what does that mean? Well, if I study nursing, I become a nurse. If I don't go into nursing, then I'm going into some field for which I'm not prepared. Well, the problem is that there's very little correlation between what the labor market economists think you're directly prepared to do and what people actually do when they graduate from school. So less than 20% of students go into the programs for which they're directly prepared overall. It's a little bit misstatement. Out of this is about 80% of all the programs we looked at, less than 20% of their graduates went into the fields for which they were directly prepared. That is a big problem because it means all labor market data you look at that's predicated on this direct prep concept is very off because 80% of the students aren't going to do that. So when you look at it specifically, let's take psychology as an example, a program offered at almost all of your institutions. The myth is taking the National Center for Education Statistics crosswalk, which has this embedded assumption about direct preparation. They say there are only 6 occupations that a person, if you will, should go into if they have a psychology degree, manager, comma, all other, a variety of psychologists, and some social research assistants. When you look at the American Community Survey, part of the US Census, at what people actually do who have a degree in psychology, you find out, which is probably not surprising to you, they don't just go into 5 fields, they go into 733 different occupations. So let's just think about that for a minute. How wrong is this direct prep assumption? Well, there's 6 things they say you should do and 733 things people really do. So it's off by over 100 multiple. I do a lot of work in this kind of stuff. And, if you're off by 10%, you're really doing pretty well. When I have to multiply by 100 to get close, that's not good. And they go into all sorts of interesting fields too, by the way. General and operations managers, some admin assistants, customer service reps, managers, other chief executives. Keep in mind, this includes all kinds of one-man shops. Anybody who's a senior executive really gets counted into chief executives. That is the term that is the official title of that occupation, but it encompasses a lot more than just CEOs. Sales reps, business managers, HR specialists, and this list goes on for 700 occupations. So people with this degree can go into a lot of different fields. Who hires them? Well, they work in 147 different industries, 35,000 different companies. And over here are the top 10 employers of psychology grads. Starbucks is number one. That's a mixed bag. That means some people are baristas, but some are in management training programs hoping to move up within Walmart or Starbucks. But, I think you could look at that and say those people are probably unemployed, underemployed. Walmart, same issue. Some of those people are in management training programs. But we do have some underemployment there, Target. But then you get to Wells Fargo, of course, the Army, Home Depot, Lowe's, a lot of retail in here, banking, AT&T, Amazon, Best Buy. So I think in fairness, while they go into a lot of different fields, these top fields, I think you have to look at and say, fair number of these, they're probably a little underemployed. In others, they may be in a management track, but may or may not be in management when they get hired. So, Wells Fargo, for example, that could be a bank teller. It could also be a bank manager. So keep that in mind. This is not, I look at this, not the greatest set of outcomes I've seen in terms of the odds of somebody being underemployed at one of these particular companies. So we do keep track of underemployment by program, so you'll see that in just a moment. What's happening with job postings? The market out there is getting tougher. We've got a 21% drop year over year. Now, a little bit of context. If I hate to bring us back to COVID days, but we did have a real fluctuation in job postings. Coming into COVID, they dropped like a rock. Coming out of COVID, they spiked dramatically. And then they're starting to work their way back to more normal levels, which I think they're at this point. And now we're starting to see what I would call, rather than a difference because COVID inflated the numbers for job postings as it ended. Now we're starting to see, I think, a real decline in the absolute number of job postings off what I would call a more normal base. So to make a long story short, I think the job market really is beginning, not contracting, but certainly the rate of growth is slowing. And I'm hearing the first rumors of it's kind of tough to get a job out there, which hasn't been true for the last 2 or 3 years. Which occupations are still growing? Frontline supervisors in retail, police, postal, social and human service assistants, self-enrichment, psych techs, computer systems analysts, loan officers, teachers assistants, and physical therapy assistants. All areas where there's an increase in demand and increase in job postings, really. Microsoft Office is the most sought after skill. We have a lot of skills that are growing quite a bit faster. This is the number of job postings that mentioned the particular skill and the degree to which that's gone up. Event planning is number one. So companies still have enough money to have events. And I think that's flowing through to an increase in demand for event planners. The ability to do accruals, collective bargaining. I think we're seeing a lot more of big labor agreements being executed, and strikes and so forth that make collective bargaining a much more important skill. On-the-job training, public service, bargaining, emotional support, loyalty programs, applied behavior analysis, and law enforcement. So we see a couple things here that I think reflect national trends, mental health in particular, applied behavior analysis, and emotional support. Let's turn to a specific program and talk about student demand, employment, competition, and degree fit. When we do this, we start with a list of over 1,500 programs. That's essentially everything in iPads. We score it on 50 metrics. That leads to an overall score. We can break that score down by student demand, competitive intensity, jobs or employment, and finally degree fit, the degree to which that program is aligned with the degree levels that the institution teaches. So for example, at a community college, you're not going to want to offer brain surgery. And similarly, if you were a PhD oriented college or university, you might not want to offer house painting. So that helps to sort out and make sure the degrees are appropriate for the institution. We've zeroed that out now because when we're doing these meetings, we don't really know exactly who's in the audience and what their preferences would be for degree levels. We score all 1,500 programs. Again, as I mentioned at the outset, a score isn't intended to tell you what to do. It's intended to help you figure out where to focus and to explore. The decision is really up to you based on the unique situation of your institution and its mission. But this helps to make sure you don't skip over things that might be attractive, but you might not have thought of yet. So that's the benefit of the overall score. You'll notice that this is color-coded. This is true in many of the rest of the presentation I'm going to do. Green means good, and dark green is 98th percentile or higher. You can see these are all a mid-green. That means they're between the 94th and the 97th percentile. So while color may seem like a fuzzy variable to use, it's actually quantitative in this case. Green is good. As you shade down to red, things are getting worse. Student demand, here we can see a few that are up in the 90s. And we'll talk about what's in those individual metrics, competitive intensity, and so forth. Another important thing here is when you're evaluating programs, the overall score is one thing, but a program may get a high overall score because it does very well in one particular thing, like student demand. So what we would suggest is you don't want to skip over the ones that may be really, really good for jobs. It doesn't mean you'll do them, but you want to at least make sure you don't miss them by mistake. So all these, if we were in our systems live, you can sort so that you can see all the really high scoring ones on jobs and look through those and see if there's something that you ought to be paying attention to. Similarly with student demand or competition. Today, we're going to dive into one in particular, bookkeeping and accounting tech. And we'll start with student demand. And now we're looking at how the indicators of the relative size of this particular program, which is, as I mentioned, bookkeeping and accounting tech. And it scores overall at the 98th percentile for student demand. Why? Well, it does pretty well in Google search volume, 87th percentile, with 64,304 Google searches in the past 3 months. And the particular scoring system we have is giving it 2 points for that. If we look further, new student enrollment, 99th percentile. So in terms of enrollment, it's very large. Online is very large as well at 6,500, 99th percentile. You put online and on ground together, and you're still to 99th percentile. So all our indicators are telling you this is a very big program. Now the question is, will it continue to be big? For that, we need to understand growth. Google's very optimistic. It's up 24% year over year. That's at the 84th percentile. So it's one of the faster growing programs in the database. New student enrollment, however, is down. And completion volume is flat. So it's a difficult one to interpret. And I think when you see these three growth numbers going in different directions, the first and most important thing to say is it's not clear going forward whether this program is growing or not. Some programs, it's very cut and dry. It's shrinking, or all three metrics will be going down. Others, all three are going up. In this case, you're getting a mixed read, and that just diminishes your certainty in terms of what's really happening. There is another way of looking at it, which is Google's telling you that looking forward, the demand for this program is probably picking up. New student enrollment is telling, well, it hasn't happened yet. Right now, demand is down. And historically, demand that's the completion volume, that's from iPads. It's been going up a little bit, or flat. So I look at this and I say, I wouldn't bet that it's going to be growing. There's an indicator it might be turning around after that 13% drop, but you really can't be sure. Now let's take a look at jobs. Overall BLS employment in all the fields that a bookkeeping accounting tech could go into. So recall that we don't use that direct prep crosswalk. We have it if you're interested, you can look at data that way. But we actually go in and we use American Community Survey. We have a giant database of over 60 million individual people, what they majored in, what jobs they've held. And with that, we've built a crosswalk that reflects not what people should do, according to labor market economists, but what they actually do. And so that we use that, we apply that to BLS employment. That's at the 99th percentile. I mentioned that oftentimes you'll see people are underemployed. And in the case of this degree, 34% of the graduates do end up in jobs that don't really require a degree. So that's worrisome, and one of the numbers we really try to keep a close eye on. Is it growing? Not really. 1 and 3 year growth rates range from -1 to almost -4%. Bit worrisome. Pay is good. It's not great. It's slightly above average. You can see here we're at the 61st percentile at $55,000 a year. And the 25th percentile was probably going to be the entry level wage, quite a bit lower at 37,000. And that's 41st percentile. So not a great number. It's below the midpoint in terms of what people get paid coming out of college. It does pick up if you have an associate's degree. It's up to 47,000. And that post-entry, by the way, is what people earn after they've been out in the workforce for about 4 years. So think of that as a more steady state number for what people are likely to make with this degree. There are plenty of jobs still, even though there's been a little bit of a decline, 4.6 job postings per graduate. That does put it at the 91st percentile. So if somebody's looking for an entry-level position, bookkeeping is still a healthy place to go in the sense that they can get out and get a job, albeit at a fairly low wage. Now let's take a look at competitive intensity. This you can see is pink. As I mentioned, green is good, red is not so great. So here we are with really the red means pink is what I refer to when it's actually pink, if I were being fair. We've got a lot of people offering this program, 904 institutions nationwide. That's not surprising. It's been a bread and butter program for decades. 8 new programs launched. So that is a bit worrisome. A lot of programs, and they're still being added. Online in-market students. So there are 318 institutions who offer this program online. And the average program completions at these institutions are 25. I tend to not pay too much attention to that number because it tends to be skewed by some very large players. And you'll see in a moment that that's the case here. Median is a better number if you want to say, well, how big is my program likely to be? That's 7 completions. Remember that we're talking completions here, not enrollment. So you have to multiply 7 times the number of years a person takes to complete this and add a little bit for the attrition rate within the program. So for a 2-year program, I'd say that means there are 14 to 20 students enrolled to produce 7 completions a year. Google cost per click here is getting to be fairly toxic. We're at the 95th percentile, and that's because, as we'll see in a second, there are a lot of online players competing in the Google market to attract students in this particular discipline. That's the 89th percentile in terms of level of competitiveness for Google clicks. So that means that it's in the top 10% across all the things Google has, not just college, in terms of the cost of a click. And why? Because we have 380 online institutions offering this, all competing to win those students. So they're willing to bid up that price quite a lot. That's 29% of all institutions offering it, and 23% of total completions that are taking place online. So Who is offering those programs? SNHU is leading the pack, 299 online enrollments. Eastern Gateway, that number is going to have come down a lot since this data was collected. Why? Because Eastern Gateway's program got shut down by the feds. So my hypothesis would be that number is approximately zero right now. Colorado Technical University, Colorado Springs, 203 students, and you can see who the other players are. Now, what's another thing to keep track of here? When you're using IPEDS data, normally what happens is the students are reported in the headquarters location of the institution. So all 299 of those bookkeepers at Southern New Hampshire University are going to be reported in New Hampshire. So that's probably more bookkeepers than they have in the entire state of New Hampshire. All of them were busy yesterday counting votes, I'm sure. But in reality, those 299 students are spread all over the country. So we do a bunch of work to using NC-SARA data on where each institution has to report the state in which its students are enrolled. So we can then move all those students back into the state where the student really lives, which is terribly important because there are certain cities where there are a ton of online players, Phoenix being one of them. And it looks as though every job in that city is saturated by the graduates, when in fact, almost none of those graduates are in that city. They're all located around the country, wherever they're taking that online program. It also means that for the rest of the country, you're not seeing that there may be you've got competition from these online players in your local market that the normal data would not reveal to you. And the last part of this that's important is it screws up the labor market data, because when you're trying to look at the supply and demand, and supply being the number of graduates, demand being the number of jobs, if you don't include the online graduates in your market, you're significantly underestimating the supply of graduates for that labor market. So it's very important that whatever data source you're looking at actually puts these students in the market in which they're getting educated, not in the market of their home, of the headquarters location of the university. To my knowledge, nobody else does this, but it's hugely important. So finally, we talk about degree fit. And this is an interesting one. I've never seen it quite this skewed before. But you've got 64% of the people who are employed actually have no college or some college. And that's, as I say, very unusual. So your graduates are going to be competing against folks who probably came up through the accounting function and are doing bookkeeping, perhaps in an accountant's office with supervision, and have maybe learned how to do it on their own since then. But an awful lot of them are not trained in the field specifically. Of the people who are trained, it's a mix of associates and bachelor's education that they have. Now, there's one other thing here that we report that is of interest to you, and that is, what does it cost to teach a student this particular program? Now, these are index numbers. So 1.0 on this index is average cost. If the program is above 1.0, then it's more expensive than normal. If it's below 1.0, it's less expensive than normal. And you can see both the average and the median cost per student credit hour here are well below 1. So this is a relatively inexpensive program to teach. So if you're thinking of launching it, you can take that into account and understand that you're going to be able to recruit faculty here at reasonable wages and run reasonably full classes, which is what drives down your median cost per SEH. By the way, SEH in this case is cost per student credit hour. Who takes this program? We think it's important to keep in mind the demographics that a program tends to attract. Why? Because if you're not careful, you can end up with a campus that's, all purple people or orange people or whatever the particular area, demographic characteristic is. And obviously, I'm using metaphors there. In this case, the program skews female, and 75% of the people who take this program are female. So if your campus was running below 50% female, you might want to think about this program as an opportunity to attract more females to your campus. The rest of the statistics are pretty much in line with the general demographics of this market. So a little bit up in Asian, 5% of the people in the market are Asian, but 10% of the people in this program are. Black, about even. Hispanic, a little under indexing, 25% in the market, 19% in this program. white, a little bit higher indexing. So this is just a way of saying, okay, if I want to keep in mind when I'm making program decisions, who I'm likely to attract and how that's going to affect the long-term demographics of my campus. This is our master sheet. It is all the data about a program on a single page. And we do this not because it makes for a beautiful graphic, but because it allows a decision maker to have one page, all the data is there for them. They don't have to hunt around between different documents or across several pages to understand what's going on in this particular program. And when you get comfortable with the color codes, it actually becomes surprisingly easy to interpret even a page with as much data as this. We can see up top, light, that medium green. So I know it's a good program, 96th percentile. I can immediately see where its strengths and weaknesses are. Student demand is good. Student demand is excellent, I should say. Employment's good. It's very competitive. So as I say, very quickly get a grasp of the program because we've got all the information in one spot. And while it's a little daunting at first, once you get used to using this, it's actually pretty simple to interpret. And what it allows you to do, if somebody comes in with a program idea, you don't have to spend 3 months studying it to determine whether it's worth pursuing further. Generally speaking, you can come to a scorecard, and this would be an interesting one, where if somebody came in and said we should offer bookkeeping, I think the answer is maybe. And you might have to do some more work to reach a final decision on that. In many cases, it's very cut and dry. It'll either be all green and it's a go, or it's all pink and you really better think hard about whether you want to roll that out. But that means that initial decision about whether I should spend more time analyzing this is actually relatively straightforward. So let me summarize. In December, Google searches for direct workforce programs were up. Thank heavens. Sterile processing tech grew by 46%. Google cost per click rose 4%. Fall certificate enrollment is up 1% year over year. Again, thank heavens. Associate enrollment's pretty flat, but remember, in this case, flat is a big improvement. Security grew 18% at both the certificate and the associate level. So cybersecurity is a big growing field. Most traditional labor market sources, as I mentioned, they rely on direct prep. It's a very mistaken form of analysis. It leads you to believe there are many fewer jobs in certain fields than there really are. And again, it's not off by a little, it's off by a factor of 100. Bookkeeping and accounting tech does well. The volume is strong, growth is off, and there are lots of jobs, but the wages are not great. So not a surprise there on the wages, but it does temper enthusiasm for what might otherwise be a very large program. Only 13% of the workforce in that field hold an associate degree, with higher numbers in no college, and that may be a bit of what's holding down the wages as well. So let me stop there. Again, if you're interested in doing program evaluation, would suggest that you go ahead and grab the book. We're happy to share with you next month what's been an update to our data. So we'll be doing that on Wednesday, February 28th. And then if you're interested in what's going on at the bachelor's level and above, we do run a separate webinar for that. The next one's actually tomorrow, and we'll be running it again on February 29th with the newest data for next month. So we're changing our format a little bit. Next day, we'll be presenting not just the national data, but we'll start to dig down and look at it by geography. So we'll be picking particular states. We'll let you know in advance what those are, so that if your state is in, you can make a special effort to try and make it to that presentation, because that state level data is very different than the national data. So any programs people want to look at?
I think we have 2 requests so far. One of them is a licensed practical nurse and auto mechanic, I think.
Terrific. I guess I'll have to stop sharing. So what we're going to do now is actually open our system and take a look at those 2 programs.
Yep. So the first program is licensed practical vocational nurse 513901. Can everyone see the scorecard, or am I sharing my desktop screen?
We can see it.
Working.
Great. Awesome. So we're looking at the vocational practical nurse scorecard. Really quickly, you're going to start seeing these colors that you might have seen during Bob's presentation as well. And the color coding is meant to suggest areas of strength. But it's also meant to just guide you into different sections of the scorecard. For example, at a high level, I can see that licensed practical vocational nurse in the national market, when looking at the associates and below scoring rubric, is getting a total score of a 32, and that 32 is in the 99th percentile in the market national. Okay, so this is a very strong overall program. A lot of that strength is coming from a dark green here in student demand. We're getting a light green in employment. And where there may be some questions for this program, maybe here in the competitive intensity, where we're seeing a 50th percentile competitive intensity score. Okay. So naturally, I'm going to go ahead and try to identify areas within these individual quadrants where I can see strength, right? So for student demand, the quadrant as a whole is strong. And what's driving the strength really are these size metrics, which is what we're seeing here, right? But that is being essentially challenged by the growth metrics underneath, where we're seeing that although, Google search volumes, new student enrollments, and completion volumes are large in this program, the trends, year-over-year trends in units and percentage changes seem to be decreasing for things like new student enrollment, completion volumes, and Google search volumes as well. Okay.
Now, Google's actually up there. So that's the one optimistic thing on growth.
Oh, yeah, correct. Yep.
So we can hope that this is going to get better in the future. But certainly the enrollment and completion volume numbers are worrisome.
And just to highlight something here, you can see a first percentile change in units for completion volumes. This is suggesting that, kind of the absolute value here of minus 510 is one of the most significant drops compared to all other programs in this market. Okay.
Yeah, and just to temper that slightly, that's partly because it's just a huge program.
Exactly.
Its percentage growth or decline is not that extreme, down 1% in completion volume, 5% in student enrollment. When you're doing that on a base of 45,000 completions, it's a big number compared to other programs. The decline is bigger than some whole programs.
Yeah. And that's exactly why we give both, right? The unit and the percentage, just to make sure we are noticing that. Then when I look over at the employment, it seems to be relatively healthy in terms of the size of entry jobs here. 246,000 job posting totals in the past 12 months is at the 99th percentile. And we're seeing an entry 25th percentile wage of 43,000, which is in the 71st percentile for entry level wages here. Another thing to highlight is I would probably highlight the job postings per graduate of 5.4. This is meant to suggest that there are, opportunities for these graduates here. It isn't an overly saturated field currently. Okay. Last but not least would be the competitive intensity. Just quickly, what strikes me here would probably be the pink 99th percentiles that you see for volume of in-market competition. There are 937 campuses with graduates in this field. That's a 99th percentile value, meaning that this is a very competitive field. Now, that being said, the in-market program sizes are also very large, right? So although there are a lot of players in this market, a lot of institutions and campuses offering this program, we can see that the programs are large on average and in median here. We're looking at 96th and 97th percentile values. Okay.
Yeah, it's dropping a little bit though. That always worries me when I see a decline in a median program size.
Yep.
That's consistent with what we said before about program size, but that means that people are in the market already, are having a little trouble filling their classrooms.
Down here, we have some national online competition metrics. This is meant to give you a sense of just online viability. Who else is offering this program online, and how much does it tend to complete online? And when we're looking at all of the competition in the market, we're seeing only 2% of institutions are offering this program online, and only 1% of the completions are actually happening online. So this is suggesting that this program may be more on ground or in person.
Not surprising.
Mhm.
A lot of hands-on training needed here.
So the score, we can leverage the scorecard to get a sense of, what are the metrics that are speaking towards, strength in student demand, employment. How can we better understand the competition? And then the last piece here on the right is going to be the degree fit. We have a couple of categories of information here. We have national completions by level, right? This is meant to give you a sense of at what award level is this program completing nationally? And we can see that the degrees being conferred in this field are happening at 96% of the time certificate and then 4% associates, right? Why is this powerful? Because we know we're not going to offer this program here at the master's level, especially because we're going to also give you BLS educational attainment, which scans the market for folks who work in a field related to this program. And we can tell you that there's essentially no need really for anything post associates to work in this field is what the
Yeah,
state.
this is a special field too. By rule, you can't offer an associate's degree in this anymore. I'm not sure who the 4% are, but you can. The government cracked down and said, if I'm going to go to school for 2 years, I should become a nurse. So this is by rule a 1-year program now and a certificate. That changed, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. Interestingly, it's only about average to teach, so it's not too expensive. This is why I mentioned gender and other demographic characteristics too. This is no surprise to anybody who's anywhere, familiar with nursing, but it does skew 90% female. Now, why? There's no reason guys shouldn't be taking nursing programs. There really isn't, but they don't. So if you were to launch this program, you should recognize that it's going to bring more women on campus than men. So that neither here nor there in terms of whether that's good or bad. It's a matter of what you're trying to accomplish on your campus.
Mhm.
Let's just see, does it skew demographically? Um, it does a bit. So we've got overrepresentation of Black, uh, Hispanic. I'm trying to read, yeah, a little bit under on Hispanic and a little bit over on white. So an interesting demographic profile, again, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. This could help certain kinds of diversity, but not all.
Mhm. Great.
So
Next program. Let me just double check the chat here.
we're at 3 minutes of, we may be done.
Okay.
So thank you, everybody. Very much appreciate your joining us this afternoon. If you have questions or you'd like to look at another program, give us a ring. We'd be happy to pull up your program in your market and have a look with you to see if the one that you're looking at is attractive or not. And of course, if you'd like to have this data, we have it. Just to give us a call. We'd be glad to run a demonstration for you of the systems and show you what you could have on your desktop as well. Thanks very much.